Welcome to the MS Dev Show, episode number 136. This week we talk with Nick Craver about running Stack Overflow at scale. Microsoft is about to fix our biggest frustration. Jason's Airpod review. And if your laptop doesn't have 3 4K monitors, it's time for a new one.
This episode of the MS Dev Show is brought to you by Expose, the market leader of .NET and Java APIs for file business formats. Natively work with DocX, XSLX, PPT, PDF, MSG, MPP, image formats, and many more.
This week we have Nick Craver, architecture lead at Stack Overflow. How's it going, Nick?
Pretty good. How about you guys?
Good. I'm super excited. Carl lined this up, and I've always been a huge fan of your architecture blog posts. And I know we've talked about them on the show before, so I'm super excited to talk about this. So, Carl, what do we have for the comment of the week?
Comment of the week we got off of our website from Majerus. We were talking about Ubiquity the other day, and he got excited because he has Ubiquity in his home since 2010. And he kind of brings a few points about there being several different product lines from Ubiquity, some being a little bit more inclusive, some being a little bit more standalone. And he says the Unify line, which I think was the one that we talked about, as he sees it, is aimed at small to medium-sized businesses. Interestingly, Ubiquity did just drop the Amplify line a few months ago, and that's aimed at residential consumers. So really, a lot of their stuff that we're looking at right now is made a little bit more heavy duty because it's made for businesses. Mm-hmm. So we really enjoyed your comment, Majerus. And if you want to get mentioned on the show like him, send us an email to feedback@msdevshow.com, comment on Facebook, YouTube, or Stitcher. We really like those 5-star iTunes reviews.
Yeah, I love that he left that comment. And I think I mentioned this before, but I love companies that make high-end like commercial grade products and then get into the consumer space. I think that they tend to make some of the best products. You know, I always use like Garmin as an example, you know, building like aircraft GPS for, you know, $10,000 and up. And then all of a sudden they build something for the car, and it's just, you know, it's just great getting all that R&D in a residential product. So I guess I'm kind of assuming, but you know, a lot of that expertise that Ubiquity has can come down into that consumer line. So yeah, I'm anxious to hear how well that works.
That's great. I'm running it.
Oh, that's what you're running? The Amplify line?
I just install it for a family friend as well.
Okay.
That's the one we found a botnet on their DVR was the actual issue, but now they have some really kick-ass Wi-Fi as well.
Okay. So they have, is it multiple access points and?
Yeah. So in my office, you can actually see on the wall over there.
Look at that.
They're kind of unobtrusive. You get one controller to manage everything, and you can run it on a Raspberry Pi or their Cloud Key or computer, and you put as many access points as you want. So when we do the basement, here, actually, these just came in the mail, 2 SFP converters. I'll run 2 10-gig lines to the basement, put another switch in, 1 gig for now, but they're 10-gig capable, and then I'll put another access point down there. But you need more coverage, just add a point. You know, it's not buy another $400 router, you buy a $120 access point. And
is your basement the backup line for Stack Overflow?
That's the guest room. These you can get gigabit Wi-Fi. It's incredible.
Nice.
So
very, very nice.
So is your place available on Airbnb? Because that would be as far as like network connectivity while traveling, that would be your house would be the best option. You make us look kind of pathetic as far as like, you know, architecture of our Wi-Fi and that. So that's pretty hilarious. Yeah, that does look pretty good on the wall. So did you just run the cable like into the wall and down?
Yeah. So I run all my. I can show you pictures if you want. I run Ubiquity in my setup here, all the network stuff, and I have 2 IKEA Expedits, or the Calyxes now, under my desks. So I run my desktops on there, put the Ubiquity under, and I've got just a port panel on the wall which has cable coming from DirecTV, from Time Warner. That's our internet. You only get 300 down, 20 up. That's as much as it gets around here. And then I have Ethernet. So like my TVs only have Ethernet.
Yeah.
They have power and Ethernet. That's it. There is no cable. But you can watch DirecTV over TCP/IP from the Genie. Mm-hmm. The RVU stuff actually has like the client built into the TV. There's no HDMI port or anything. just a very thin TV and a network, and it works pretty well.
You want to put your camera down a little bit because it's just like we can see like half your face. There we go.
There's some secret Stack Overflow.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, hide all the secret stuff. Oh no, people are gonna see they're gonna see the future answers. So before we jump into the news, one thing that I was going to do, I actually got, for people on video, you'll be able to see these, but I got the new, I can't even see what I'm projecting here. So there we go. I got the new Apple AirPods. And when these things were announced, I just made a whole bunch of jokes about them. I thought they were the stupidest thing. I thought they looked stupid. I thought they were expensive. I thought that, I would just lose one of them. I was like, why would any idiot ever buy those? And then
you did.
Yeah, and then this idiot bought them. So I kind of want to explain, because my thinking on them just reversed one day, and I was just thinking about Bluetooth headsets, and I know, Carl, you've been making recommendations, and I've been listening to like a lot of different recommendations. Like, I go on walks, and sometimes do some running, and I never wanted anything that would go over the ears. It just feels like obtrusive to me. So that's just sort of a personal choice thing. So, I just haven't done Bluetooth. I've always been a fan of the wires, and I've always actually liked the Apple Earpods. They always fit me really well, and I like the controls on the cord. And that was the other thing too on AirPods. Like there's really no control, so I'd be giving that up as well. So what I did is I started thinking about it a little bit more, and I was thinking, for podcasts, it sure would be nice to be able to throw something really quick into my ear and be able to listen to a podcast and then pop it back out. So I started looking at some reviews of the AirPods, and I started giving them a little bit more of a chance, and they started to make sense to me. And then I went out and I looked at some reviews, and a lot of people were like, oh, like the Jaybirds are better. Like the Jaybird X3s are out now. And they're basically these ones where you have like two headphones and they're connected with a wire. And I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. If one falls out, then you don't have to worry about it. So I actually went and bought those. And they come with some different size earpieces. I always assumed that my ears were gigantic, but apparently the inside of my ears is actually pretty small. So I ended up using like the small, you have to like size these things. The Jaybirds. And then what was annoying about them is you have to like install them. You have to like push in your ear and like twist, and I don't know, like, hit it with a hammer. It was just really weird. And it was easy to get into my right ear, but my left ear, it was difficult to get into. Anyway, kind of a long story short, I really hated them. I thought they were super uncomfortable, and it just sort of reaffirmed the fact that I didn't want something like that. I really actually wanted the earpods, but without a wire, because while I'm walking, like my coat ends up pulling on them and all that kind of stuff. Plus it's awkward to have like one in and one out. So anyway, I was right on the lack of controls. That is pretty annoying. One thing I will mention, the Apple Magic does give them a little bit of usability advantage with the Jaybirds. Like the charging of them was really awkward. You'd install this really weird charging plate, and it was something that I would probably end up forgetting somewhere. And pairing these is magic as well. Like you literally just open the case up next to a phone. Again, if you're on video, well, I'm not even going to show it. I'll skip past that. But if you just pop the case open, they end up pairing with whichever iPhone is closest. So a little bit of Apple magic. They do have a button on the back of the case that will make it so you can pair them with other things. I haven't actually paired them with anything else. I just use them with the iPhone. So price, yeah, they are expensive. If you start looking at, if you actually start looking at any headphones that are the same design, where you have two independent headphones like this, these actually, to my knowledge, are the cheapest ones that you can buy. Most of those are like, $170, $200. Some of them are even $300. The one where you have two independent headphones like this. And I don't think those other ones have the Apple Magic where you just pop in one. These actually detect that it's in your ear and will just turn on that one. You pop it out and it'll actually pause music and it'll turn off your podcast or whatever. So there's actually a huge, ecosystem advantage of buying, an Apple product. So people are always worried about them falling out. I tried to make them fall out by like moving my jaw around, by like, thrashing my head around. They don't fall out of my ears. Like it's just like not possible. Yeah, go ahead.
How do they compare fit wise compared to like the traditional Apple earphones?
Yeah. I don't know why people are saying they're a different size. I have looked like very close.
So my question is, are they the same? Because I don't like the ones that come with.
Yeah, so they
don't
based on me looking at them, they are identical. The difference being the stems are a little bit thicker, which really doesn't affect it. But here's the thing, like my headphones, what I realized while I was waiting for these things to get shipped, what I realized is every time that the ear pods were falling out of my ears was actually due to the cord pulling on it, usually because of a jacket or something. Now, if the ear pods don't fit your ears, don't get the AirPods. Like they're the same thing. They won't fit right. If the ear pods currently like make your ears sore or something like that, then the AirPods are doesn't make any sense. So anyway, for like around the house, like being able to like pop this little case open, throw one in my ear and start listening to a podcast is amazing. I can still hear everything around me. When I'm done, I can just take it out. It pauses. I pop it into the case and the case charges it. And I won't get in all the technical details because I don't think that's interesting. Now, one of the things that I talked about earlier was losing these. It actually, nobody will ever lose one of these. And I'm sure like somebody will, obviously. But what I'm saying is like, there's no reason for you to ever lose one of these. It makes zero sense for you to lose one of these unless they don't fit in your ears and they fall out somewhere. Because the reason being, these things are either in my ears or they're in this case. There's no other place that I never like take one out and like sit it on my desk like I just did for an example. You'd never do that. Like this is the home of them. They charge in here and that's where they end up living. So you will never lose one of them. What you will lose is this. You will lose both of them, including the charger. You're either going to lose nothing or you're going to lose the whole thing. That's what's going to happen. And it's totally possible. The strange effect happens though, and I've heard people comment on this. When you spend $160 on something, you tend to mentally keep track of it. I have roughly, 10 pairs of ear pods around the house. I know where one pair, well, there might be one in my desk, maybe not. I don't know. Like they're so inexpensive and they come, after you keep buying phones, right? You keep getting them. Like it's not worth the mental energy keeping track of them. So there is that. So I have yet to misplace these. I guess we'll wait and see. But I actually think that they're great. I think it's reasonable for the price. If you are a runner and if you ever have one that you think might fall out on occasion, there's that little wire that you can get to hold the two together. And people are like, well, it's stupid. You need a wire, then it's like the other headphones. Like, why not get some of the other headphones? Well, the reason being because you have options. The fact that they're independently communicating Bluetooth to each one just means that you can use the right one, you can use the left one, you can use both, and you can use both with a wire if you want. It's about the flexibility. So, any other questions? Does that make sense? That's my review.
You answered my question.
Yeah.
They look appealing. The main problem I have with them is that my main use case is a 6-hour flight. Okay. And after about 5, they die, and you're just kind of they recharge.
No. Yeah, that's no. Okay, so
you have to put them back in the case.
Yeah, so there's a couple comments on that. So I wasn't going to mention the specs specifically because they always lie about battery life. Like, first of all, there's something going on in this because the case is supposed to ultimately give you 24 hours of listen time. Right. I'm pretty convinced, and I don't quite have enough data yet, that this thing just drains very quickly doing nothing. Like with them sitting in there, even though they're at 100%, the case rapidly loses charge. And I don't know if that's because of the battery they're using. And again, that's like, I don't have enough evidence to like show that, but I've seen that happen where magically I all of a sudden have a lot less charge. So there's a couple things you could do there. When the battery is getting low, and they make it so you can check the battery really easy because you pop open the case and you can see the battery level of each one. What you could do on a plane, you could pop one of them out, continue listening on the other one, pop it in this case. If you put it in, these things charge like insanely fast. If you put it in there for 5 minutes, you're going to be good to go again. Put that one in here, pop the other one out, 5-minute charge. It's not going to be a problem. I mean, obviously you're only going to have one headphone for, a few minutes or whatever, but I really don't see that as a big problem. If they took 4 hours of charge, that would be a bigger issue. But they on this 6-hour flight, you're going to go use the bathroom, right? So like unless you just want to take them with you, I guess. But if you want, like whenever they come take your drink order, just like pop them in the case, like while they're making your drink, even for that minute, it would get you through a 6-hour flight. I'm pretty convinced. So,
I'd give them a try. Yeah. I'm very happy with. I have a very small Bluetooth that you just plug a 3.5 millimeter into, and you just get 24 hours of charge. They're interesting.
Yeah.
They're not for me. Of course, I don't like how the AirPods fit, or the AirPods fit in the first place.
Yeah.
My wife really does, though, so she might give it a try.
I take these headphones on a plane because I find these to be, they block out the sound really well. But for walking, I mean, I use these AirPods for a couple hours every day generally. What was that?
The ones that the in-ear, or just the ones that don't have as much adjustment. The ones that you tried, were they the triple in-ear, like it's 3 flanges that you're pressing?
Well, they had like a little piece of rubber, and then they had like a Nike swoosh thing.
It kind of hooked on the inside of your ear.
It hooked into the ear. Yeah.
Did you stop when you met resistance?
Well, I didn't really want to get into that, but like the Jaybirds, like you had to jam them into your ears because you had to. If you go look at the reviews, some people will say that they sound terrible, and other people will swear they are like the best sounding headphones of that design. The reason is the little piece on there. There's rubber and foam that they give you. You can use either one. They have to make a complete seal within your ear. They sound like absolute garbage with no bass unless they have a perfect seal within your ears. So that's the difference in the reviews there. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to give my take because I felt like a lot of the reviews, I don't know, it's usually, Apple people. I consider myself I think I have a little bit different perspective, like seeing them as being completely ridiculous at first and then sort of thinking like, okay, what is the actual vision here, and does this actually make sense, and see how they actually work for me. So if you like the existing earpods, and you're okay giving up some of those controls, so whenever you double tap on these things, Siri comes in your ear, and you can do commands. You can say volume up, which is that's still like the craziest thing ever. I immediately switch it. You can actually switch out to play pause, which I find immensely useful because I can just go pause, and keep them in, and then I can double tap them again to play. Or even when I first put them in, like music just doesn't start playing. I just want to play the last thing I was playing, so I just double tap them and it starts playing. So I'm glad they did that. I wish they had other options, like maybe like a triple tap or something. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to give everybody a little bit different perspective on them, and actually specifically talk about podcasting. Because music is, I think, a different animal. I rarely listen to music. But for podcasting, especially like being able to throw one in there and be walking or whatever, it's great. So anyway, that segment was way longer than what I wanted, but hopefully that was useful to people that are listening. Okay, Microsoft is about to fix Windows laptops' biggest frustration. Preach, Carl.
Yeah. At WinHack in December, Microsoft announced that coming sometime soon, in order to get the little window made for Windows 10 sticker on computers, that they're going to have to support precision touchpads on all laptops. Mm-hmm. And that's huge because then you get all the gestures in Windows. So while it doesn't give you a Mac touchpad, like I know a lot of people want,
the gold standard,
it's definitely a big step forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping that it just keeps improved. I mean, the precision touchpad, like my Surface Book, the trackpad is much better. It's 90% as good as the Mac, but we still got to keep pushing that forward. It's got to get perfect.
Although I think the Mac is taking a few steps backwards. I saw one of the new Macs recently where the touchpad is just almost ridiculously too big.
It is. It's comically huge now. Well, that's because they refuse to go with touchscreens. I mean, it's just funny how like the contortions they're going through just so that they can't admit defeat on the touchscreens. It's unbelievable.
It'll never happen. They can't unless they're half a millimeter thick. Johnny Ive's just going to punt it out the door.
Well, I was almost wondering if there's some engineering reason with the OS that they just kind of, for some reason, engineered their way out of being able to support it easily.
Well, I mean, you always are going to go through that period where it sucks, right? Like when Apple went to Retina, or as in the Windows world we call it a high DPI, like that pixel doubling, like the world sucked for a year. I mean, the Twitter client was messed up for more than a year. There's this pain you have to go through, and it's kind of like removing the headphone jack. You have to go through that pain. And the thing is, like on the Windows side, like we've gone through that pain. So now, like we're kind of in the clear, and we've learned a lot. We figured out a lot of things. And now Apple would have to go and do the same thing, right? They would have to have a poor experience for a year because there's just no way to perfect it on the first go at it. And you can't. I mean, people have to update apps and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, and now's not a good time. I mean, they're not people. They don't have like a really positive mind share at this point with the stuff that they've been doing. So, okay. In more positive news, no, rest in peace, Cyanogen. Oh, whoops.
Yeah. So, Cyanogen was the AOSP Android open source version of Android that kind of. Well, I didn't use it because I'm not huge on Android, but I know it was pretty popular for people kind of like wanting to just strip all the crap out of their phones.
Yeah, because it would like replace the OS, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You would root your phone and get rid of whatever came on it, and you would get this, and it would be theoretically a nice, maybe even newer version of Android than what you can normally get.
Right.
And Microsoft had made deals with them in order to get their Office apps, even Cortana, installed by default on Cyanogen. And now that Cyanogen is essentially out of business now, it looks like Microsoft doesn't have that to lean on in the mobile space.
Yeah. I think really it's really unfortunate because a lot of people were like, using this. They loved it. So I don't know what else to say about it. Let's see here. Razer's, here's my next laptop, Carl. Razer's Concept laptop has 3 17-inch 4K displays. Your laptop does not. Your laptop sucks.
It does suck now.
Is that the real title?
So yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah, that is the actual title.
Wait, they're not 4K. This article's wrong. It's 10K total, so it can't be 4K per.
So it's close to 4K. Well, most 4K monitors aren't actually 4K either. So
Right. They're 3.8.
3.8. So either way, it's a lot more displays than you normally have. It's 4 feet of displays wide. I think it's 28 by 9 or something like that when you add them all together. And this is, as we're recording this is day one at CES, and this is a CES article. This is not for sale. Razer is not saying that they're even going to make this, but man, I want multiple displays on my laptop.
Yeah, I wonder what the kind of minimum bar. If let's say I guess they sort of have to be 4K, but I don't know. Well, like to have a good screen, what is the minimum bar to have 2 more screens that fold out like this? Like I wonder what the weight adder is. Like if you take, just a reasonably powerful laptop, like nothing insane, but maybe like a 4 or 5 pound laptop. I'm wondering what like the weight adder and let's just ignore cost, but it's like, are we going to start seeing laptops that actually do this in production, have 2 screens that fold out? Because that's kind of a game changer in my mind.
I think for the foreseeable future, it's still kind of a gimmick, but that doesn't mean I don't want one.
But the thing is, people would buy it. I mean, I know that if this product came out, and maybe it already exists and somebody will send us an email, but I feel like if this existed and was like a viable option, I mean, not like ridiculously expensive, like not like $9,000, but I don't know, like a $4,000 machine that has very respectable specs and these 3 screens, I would see them start popping up at work. Like people would be going in a hack fest with these things, and I think I'd start seeing it not for gaming, but for just specifically productivity. So
just get your 3 seats on a plane, sit in the middle.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome. Can you imagine? Oh. Speaking of which, I took these. I was on a plane yesterday, and I took these AirPods on a plane, and I was kind of wondering, like, first of all, I feel like really stupid. They look really stupid. I keep telling myself, like, you don't care what people think. You don't like. I don't know what. There's like one part of my brain that doesn't, and the other part does, and I can't turn it off. But of course, I did get questions about them, like, what do you think? How do they fit? It's just funny because they're like impossible to buy right now. I just lucked out and saw them on the Verizon site, and actually got them shipped in like 2 days. But yeah, not many people have them, but they're interested in them. So lots of good. But this would, I could wear my AirPods on a plane with my 3 screen laptop. Be interesting.
What the battery life on this is. And don't LCDs use like 20 to 30% of the battery at the moment? Most laptops.
Well, I think that I would say yes. I think the percentage obviously varies depending on your CPU load, right? Like the CPU can go way higher, but yeah, you're right. This would definitely make the monitor dominate your battery for sure. Okay, 10 things I learned making the fastest site in the world. What's this all about, Carl?
Yeah, so since we are eventually going to be talking about optimization and stuff, I thought this was kind of interesting because I kind of agreed with some of it. Mm-hmm. I disagreed with other pieces, and I agreed with the concept, but not how he stated it for several of the other options, which kind of, goes to anything on the internet. You really have to look at some of these things with a grain of salt and maybe even a tad bit of experience behind it. Mm-hmm. But there were a few things that, I had heard, but still don't know the answer to. Like there's number 2 on there, do mobile first, like actually build your site mobily first. Mm-hmm. That's something I've heard sounds about right, but is that actually, I've never done it, so I don't have anything to compare it to.
I think it's worth trying, right? So I think developers should try it and then see if that works out being a better approach. I don't think there's going to be one answer here. I wanted to make some comments on this article is hilarious. First of all, I love some of his comments, like this one. Whenever I feel reluctant to throw out some work, I recall that life is pointless and nothing we do even exists if the power goes out. My favorite part of that quote, I almost want to get this framed, is the part, nothing we do even exists if the power goes out. That kind of puts what we do in perspective since it's all like virtual and digital. Now, I think, so my opinion on performance, like I think it's super important, first of all. I think that it doesn't get enough attention because people will be like, oh, premature optimization is the root of all evil, blah 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 blah. I guess the reason I disagree with that is like for client side performance, I think it's just one of those aspects where as you're doing things, like it's just something that you can't forget, because if you forget, you dig yourself in too deep of a hole. And then you're just locked in. Like it's one of those things where you can't justify then, like, hey boss, like we want to spend a whole bunch of money making the site faster, and we don't have any numbers to back this up, and it's just going to make our lives easier or whatever. Like you're just going to be starting in this hole. So I think it's always worth reading about these techniques. That way, whenever you're doing this, it just sort of pops in your head and says, okay, this I can use some of these techniques. And I think he's got some interesting comments here about modern ways to do this, because I've done a lot of this optimization in the past, and it's funny because this list is completely different than what it used to be. So I thought that was kind of interesting, seeing that progression and how the web works.
Well, I think, your comment there that if you don't have the numbers to back anything up, I think if there's anything you should prematurely optimize, it's measuring something. Mm-hmm. That way, when you do change something, you have a measuring stick to go against.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you've got to measure before any big change like that. Otherwise, you're just poking at knobs, and there's a lot of developers they optimize something. They think they're optimizing the overall, and either they're messing up the big picture, or it's just a psychological win. Like, this feels faster. You're dealing with 30 milliseconds. This is like, to me, an audiophile with a $5,000 set of headphones versus a $6,000 set. They're like, oh yeah, it's way better. I'm like, you're full of.
Oh, that's a great analogy. Like going from a $5 set of headphones to $150 set of headphones is like a world of difference. But you're right, it's totally diminishing returns. Yeah, and you have to use
$20,000 cable.
Yeah, you got to use tubes because the sound is warmer. So use tubes in your web server so that your pages are warmer.
That's what we do.
Yep. You heard it here first. Anything else you want to mention about this article, Carl?
No. Okay. I thought it was just a nice warm up to our discussion.
Yeah, I think it's worth a read, and I think that you'll be entertained reading as well. This guy is pretty hilarious. Some of the comments he makes. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so let's talk to Nick, because I know Nick has a wealth of knowledge locked up in his head that we want to talk about. And I guess, first of all, one thing that we'll do is we'll have a link in the show notes, because on your blog, this is the, I talked about this earlier. This is the blog post that I read every time this comes out. I always read it, and I'm always mesmerized. And actually, I always use Stack Overflow as an example of the amount of traffic that you can get out of hardware. Whenever people are like, oh, well, if you're going to have, 10,000 users in a month, you need to have 18 servers or something, which is ridiculous, because if you think about it, you probably don't even have 2 users at a time, and whenever you're talking at certain low numbers. But I always point them to this blog post, so I really like this. So I guess first of all, let's throw some stats out there. Like what kind of scale does Stack Overflow operate at?
So typically around over 1 billion web page hits per month, and our traffic's at the moment between 6 and 7 billion hits to our load balancer, and that's not including all the HTTP cache in front of it from CDN for static resources. That's just actual stuff that comes all the way back to our data center, and we can still run that on one web server. We don't do it by intentionally, but sometimes it happens.
Now, when you say one web server too, what is that web server actually doing?
So
is
that's
that like
just,
IIS, or is it something else?
Yep. So Windows 2012 R2 right now. We're looking at 2016. We've got a test VM in rotation. IIS, you're running multiple app pools. We run 9 web servers typically, and another 2 for dev and meta is our kind of staging area. Meta Stack Overflow, Meta Stack Exchange are actually 2 different web servers. They run beside dev. 1 through 9 are Stack Overflow and the rest of the network. So if you hit Stack Overflow or you hit bicycles.stack exchange, it's actually the same exact app pool. It's a multi-tenancy. So all of our hundreds of domains hit that one thing. Other things like careers or the API, those are other app pools, also on all 9. And you're talking about 64 gigs in those servers. They typically run around 40, and that's just GC gets lazier when you get more memory, which it should. And then you have dual 12-core CPUs in them. I can get you exact specs if you're curious. Or actually, it's in that. There's a blog post.
I mean, we don't have to get too detailed here.
But the point is, you're talking about like a $12,000 server. Not a $100,000 server.
Right.
When you're talking about we can run one and continually run one, you don't need a lot of hardware. You just need to optimize.
And it's IIS. I mean, people, because people still come to me and say like, oh, IIS is slow, or they'll be running Node, and like, why do I have to run Node with IIS in Azure? Which you don't. But it by default, if you're using like a Windows machine, like that's how it works. I'm like, well, I don't want IIS in there. IIS is slow. And I always point them as an example. It's like, this is one of the busiest pages or sites on the internet, and they can run it through one IIS server. So how is it slow?
And the average question page last month, I just pulled the numbers again, 18.2 milliseconds.
Yeah.
And that's not, people think that we're caching. No, if a logged in user goes in, all the counts in the top bar are a hit to Redis. That's about 5 to 7 hits to Redis, depending on who you are, if you're a mod or not. The question, the answers, the comments, all loaded from the database real time when you loaded that page. The sidebar for related questions may or may not be cached. Most of the time it's not. The tags in the top right are hitting our tag engine in the background, and you can do all that together in 18 milliseconds. And we haven't even go full async yet, so we can probably get that further down. But when you zoom out, that's actually not the place to optimize, which is probably something worth talking about. A lot of developers focus on this one number, and you zoom out to, let's say, Australia, and the load time is 400 to 600 milliseconds. Well, that 18 is not looking so fancy, is it? You need to optimize other things. You need your network, your HTTP2, your connection latency, your TLS false starts, right? Like a lot of other things come into play once you zoom out, and people consider ops land, I guess, a little bit. And that's kind of interesting because we don't have those boundaries so much. Devs kind of cross in and they're looking at the whole picture.
So some of the numbers that actually look small to me, like one of them here, 3 terabytes total sent. 3 terabytes. That actually seems kind of small. Does that seem small to you?
So you're looking at let me pull up the exact blog.
Yeah, I'm looking at you have a long list of like detailed numbers here. So it talks about the bytes total sent.
Yeah, see, so that's HTTP. Yeah, that's all we're sending.
Okay.
The pages aren't meant to be that fast. Of course, that's gzipped because that's what's on the wire.
So what is your standard like throughput? Like what kind of internet connection would I have to run Stack Overflow at my house?
You could run it. So right now, for example, we're up at 40 megabytes outbound.
Okay.
It's not a lot.
Megabits or megabytes?
Megabytes.
Megabytes.
My home connection's 5 megabytes up.
Okay.
So, and that's on cable.
So if you had a gig connection at your home, you could host Stack Overflow.
Yes.
Wow.
Till someone DDoS you.
I mean, that shows some of the. I mean, that shows some of the efficiency there too. And we'll get into that. Not quite yet, but that shows some of the efficiency on the client side. So that's very cool.
So I've been kind of following Stack Overflow from the beginning. As I was pulling up some of the show notes information for you that we're going to put with the show notes, I noticed that I even have a lower Stack Overflow number than you. So I was just wondering, looking at it over time, it started with kind of just a couple of people developing it, and now that you have quite a big team, how has the architecture changed, from 2005-ish when it was Jeff Atwood to kind of now? What were the lessons that were learned since then, or how have things changed that forced your hand?
We don't. So I guess we change something when it makes sense, right? People get locked into these architectures, and that's just a bad habit. This is like any political thing or decisions. You're like, when new information comes in, you can change your mind. That's how brains are supposed to operate, right? And if something is worth not only changing, not only is it better, it's worth changing to, because people are like, oh, this is better, this is faster. Okay, but it's not free to move. Right, I have to move my data or move my code or move to the cloud. I'm like, yeah, that's easy to say. You said it in how many words? Now go do it with something our scale, and it's immeasurably hard, right? So things like Elastic, like search, we had full text search against SQL Server. We ran it for tags. Actually, if you search a tag of JavaScript or C#, it would use full text search on the post table to go and find it. And it was a beautiful hack. But the start and end of a tag was a funny A and a funny E in Unicode, which, by the way, totally screwed us when we went to localize into Russian and Spanish, and now we're like, damn it. So Atwood had this beautiful hack, and that was our delimiter for words for full text search. And we ran that, and then CPU was getting hot. We broke that. So actually, the first day I started, he said, fix it. And so we're like, all right, Lucene.net. And we scaled a little bit, and then Hurricane Sandy came along, and we broke that because we went from 9 web servers in New York, which were kind of on the edge, and then we went to 7 out in Oregon at the time, our backup data center. And it was enough contention increase from 9 to 7 that we tripped timeouts. There's a binary reader lock inside there, nasty little place. They fixed this long since. We helped them, gave them all the data about what we were hitting. Yeah. And we were out. So during Sandy, after we failed over, about 2 days later, we went to Elasticsearch. Because that was a Lucene to Lucene import. So that infrastructure's kind of changed, but the other stuff hasn't. Redis is the same. We're still on HA proxy. Sometimes we build it from the Git head, whatever feature we need. We're waiting for HTTP2 there. But a lot of stuff hasn't. A tag engine, I guess, has shifted. Since the beginning, like I said, tag engine was full text search. Now it's a full in-memory thing that Sam Saffron and Mark Gravel have written. Mark Gravel's got a new version. We actually want to run this on GPUs. That may happen this year. Is putting GTX 1080s, a pair of them, in a server and using those to serve which tags you want in Stack Overflow. So that'll be a really fun experiment. For 11K.
I love that too. I love how I guess we could call it agile. I love how maybe a better word is flexible or open you guys are with trying new things. I know that SQL Server 2016, you guys were using that really early days. I was just if you I was talking to was a former guest. It was Steve Murawski, and I was just have you looked at some of the advantages of Server 2016? He's like, oh yeah, we're using them. Let me show you. And I'm like, whoa, okay. you guys are on the bleeding edge for sure. I love that you guys are willing to try that stuff and then provide feedback and those types of things. So just really cool work that you guys are doing. It's as a developer and as a technical guy, you guys must have so much fun. I mean, I'm sure you guys break stuff and put yourself into a corner every once in a while. I'm guessing, but I'm guessing you're having a blast most of the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, we consider it. A lot of companies are like, oh, that'd be wasted time. Well, no, learning what does or doesn't work is not wasted time. Most of developer life is finding 9 ways that don't work and then going further down the one, right? Yeah. And it really is. Most of the people who work here believe at their core of helping developers, helping sysadmins. And if we can test this software early, we're testing SQL way before RTM. We deployed 2014 in CTP2. There's a blog post on that, why we do it. And if we can test this stuff way earlier than everyone else, especially with Microsoft, is they're getting better, more agile with this. But as a big company, once you do a release, it's a lot harder to get something fixed than it is a month before the release.
Right.
So if we can test this and find some showstoppers and save, tens of thousands of developers headaches, then yeah, it's worth 2 hours of our time to save 20,000 of your time.
Yeah.
And that's it's not a tagline. Like, we actually want to do that.
Yeah.
And luckily, management has no problem with that because we get some wins too, right? New tech has good stuff in it. Otherwise, people wouldn't upgrade.
Aspose offers a powerful set of file management APIs with which developers can create applications, which can create, open, edit, and save the majority of popular business file formats. Their product range supports a multitude of file formats, including Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations, PDF documents, OneNote, Outlook, Project, Visio files, popular image formats, and many others. Aspose produces APIs for .NET, Java in the cloud, which can be utilized in almost any modern language available today. Visit www.aspose.com for a free 30-day no limitations trial. And if you get stuck, message the friendly support team for help. All technical support is offered free of charge. Remember, if you're a lucky winner, you will receive a free developer small business license for Aspose.words for .NET. A powerful toolkit to work with Word documents in your applications.
Okay. So you guys must have like a ton of data, and I guess the question I have around that, there's always like this line that you cross where all of a sudden you go from having data to having big data, and now you need like, people start saying, oh, you need Hadoop and you need to do, MapReduce, and you get into that whole world, and then you realize like that's a super complex. I don't want to say ugly because I don't want to insult anybody who's in that world because it's actually an awesome place to be. And then you guys are using SQL, but like SQL Server, just like sort of standard queries is like kind of the other world. Like and maybe I don't have a great perspective here, but it seems like there's kind of a contrast between like normal data and big data. So do you guys have big data, and do you handle it that way? Like, how do you see the world?
I don't think we have big data. Of course, the definition of big data is a fuzzy line about 4 petabytes long.
Yeah, the definition of big data is big data, is what you're saying?
If I could find like 10 people to agree where the comma is, right? Which comma do we break on? Is it the 6 comma club, the 7 comma club? I don't know what it is.
How many commas do you have? That's awesome.
For Stack Overflow, it's not big data, right? We don't have big data for the databases. The only thing that's you could call maybe big data is we have our HTTP logs. So every time you hit our website, we record HTTP. We started this, the developer who started it was Jared Dixon. And we said, you're nuts. This is stupid. We'll never use this. Now it's like the best source of data we have. So he won that one. What we do is every time you hit the site, we record. And it was very helpful for debugging, especially login issues and things like this. Yep. And now, then we looked at it, we said, look, we can find out what questions you like, what topics you like, and suggest better things. We can improve the site for you based on this, right? So we keep that data around, and that's in SQL Server as well. And you're talking about 24, 25 terabytes of data right now. But that's still not big. I mean, what Google backs up what is equivalent to our entire data center many thousands of times a second, right? Yeah. I mean, you look at big data. I'm looking at Google. I'm looking at Facebook.
Yeah, they're probably caching all of Stack Overflow, right? And they don't think anything of it.
Yeah, they're just like, you're playing.
What site are you talking about?
They've got terabits connections, right? Tens or hundreds of terabits in their fiber connections, and we're on like a couple of gig pipes.
Yeah,
like we're tiny. We're very, very tiny. That being said, we're big enough for SQL partitioning to be a pain in the butt. Are you
guys doing? I was gonna say, are you guys doing in-memory SQL then?
No, we're not using any of that. We were misquoted about SQL Pass a couple years ago. We don't use any of the Hekaton or any of that stuff in SQL Server. It's very crud. We use some cluster column stores and we use no store procedures. We're very vanilla, and it makes it so we don't like store procedures is a big debate, right? Everyone's like, oh, they're faster, they compile faster. I'm like, that was true about a decade ago. So that kind of stuff, when you deploy a web app that's on multiple servers, that complicates things because you have to have backwards compatibility, or what state is this in, and this is switching, or if you just change your query, we just roll through and there's less friction. And I think I covered this in one of the posts about why we don't, but it's very vanilla, very CRUD usage, and that
Yeah.
scales really well. Simplicity is what scales for us.
Yeah, that I've referenced your blog post to talk about that as well, and reference the Stack Overflow architecture, because I worked at a company. I won't name names. This was a while ago, but all of our logic was in the stored procedures, and I know there's some companies that do this, and the idea being, like I would always say, isn't this a terrible idea for scale? And they say, yeah, but we can patch a system just by blowing in a new stored procedure, which just sounds even worse now in hindsight. But anyway, I really don't want to devolve into that. And it ended up being a huge bottleneck. And I kept, every time I was using SQL just for CRUD operations, it was unstoppable. I mean, it was just so incredibly fast. So I've always used Stack Overflow as a great example of that too. Like, look how far they're pushing this. And they're really, when all you ask of SQL is like, can you get me this data? Can you update this data? Can you do this? It is just unstoppable. It's whenever you say, hey, can you run this super complicated calculation across every record in this table and then tell me the one that has a result is greater than this? SQL just dies, right? Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, like, it handles it admirably, as well as it can, but it's still, you're trying to ask way too much of it.
Yeah, it depends. There's so many factors people don't understand. I'm the closest thing to a DBA we have. We're trained with other people. Most of our developers are very aware of SQL, right? And most of our cost with SQL is actually in the PCIe NVMe drives. We use very, very fast storage, which helps alleviate a lot of issues like that. Effectively, everything's in memory. Right now, Stack Overflow is running 5 to 10% CPU on SQL, which sounds impressive that we're doing that much. And these are, again, not very expensive servers. These are like $40,000 servers, including the storage, which is like, these are $8,000 a card. Yeah. And with 3 of them. That's most of your cost, right? We're about to replace those servers in March or April because they're running out of warranty after 4 years. Like, that's the reason we're upgrading. Just to do maybe 2%.
Your capacity constraint is warranty. I love it.
Bytes on disk is actually our constraint. We're like, Stack Overflow's growth rate versus the growth rate of SSDs is a constant battle because we try to wait to the last minute to see. We have luckily some inside contacts. We know what's coming with Intel and their new drives. They have some Optane stuff coming out and some non-Optane stuff. And it's weird because we're like, are we going to run out of space? And we're like, but if we wait 2 months, this new one's coming.
Yeah, it's like half the price, double the size. I mean, this is like instead of Moore's law, we'll call it like Jason's law. Like, SSD doubles every however many months. It's way shorter. Like, it's been insane, the growth and the fact now that you can buy, like, in my kids' computers, like, I threw SSDs in there and I just bought, cheap ones that were nothing special, but it's like $60 for an SSD now. It's really phenomenal. I can't believe that computer manufacturers are still shipping computers with non-SSDs. I mean, it's just, I think it's like a disservice unless you have like a super budget PC. They should all be SSDs, and everybody's guilty of it, including Microsoft. So, I mean, I'm not like singling anybody out. But it should just be SSD nonstop. So that's actually a good question. Do you use any non-SSDs then?
In the data center, each of our SQL servers, so we've got the new SQL server we're going to replace in March or April. We've got one for dev to test it out. It's on Windows 20 Server 16. So if you're going to test Server 2016, test it at your core infrastructure right under SQL Server, because what could go wrong, right? So we're testing it there first, and then we'll roll it out everywhere else because we're a little stupid. It's got spinning drives in the front, so you get 24 1.8 terabyte 10Ks on the front for that slower storage. And then there's PCIEs in the back. So for example, and the 4 terabyte cards, the P3700, 3608s that we use, are 2 controllers on the card, which is really annoying because Windows can't do RAID 10 in software. But Intel finally in the latest generation servers can do hardware RAID through the RSTE on their chipset. So we have memory, you've got your PCI storage, and then you got spinning storage. But that's only in SQL. All the web tiers are just a pair of SSDs because you boot faster. One of the very important things to remember is that when you get a lot of memory in an app pool, so like Stack Overflow, 10 to 16 gigs, if we want to dump that app pool and look at it, you need to write it to disk out of memory, right? If you're writing an IIS app pool, you pause it and it stops responding to heartbeats. So actually IIS's process activation service will kill it mid-dump unless you can write it fast enough. Or you have to engineer around and kill the process activation service while it writes and then spin it back up and hopefully it didn't crash the server.
You have really amusing problems.
They're interesting. WinDVD. It's great at parties. Just bring your WinDB.
Yeah.
Yeah, so earlier we had talked about like website performance, and I know that Stack Overflow, every time you visit it, there's a chance that you'll record certain statistics. Exactly what are you measuring on the users, and how are you using that information?
So a very easy way for anyone listening to go test this, go to teststackoverflow.com, and there's actually an explanation of all this. So what we do is in your browser for the past, I don't know, a half decade or so, they've added a thing called window.performance. It's a set of high accuracy timers, right? And you're going down to the millisecond or lower of all the different events in a page. And this is just search for window.performance MDN, get a good explanation. And you can see exactly what we're uploading on Test Stack Overflow. That's why it's put there, because we're being very open about this. And I do this blog post on SSL. My hope is that I can open source a crap ton of this data, like just gigs and gigs and gigs of this data. So what happens is on Stack Overflow, for 5% of requests, we ask the browser to upload the timings for that page and the things included in that page. And it actually has some side benefits that weren't really envisioned when we first did it. So for example, one of the HTTPS issues that we have that's a little odd, but not that uncommon, is user content, right? Users are putting images. Users are putting links. Well, an HTTPS or an HTTP image in an HTTPS page is not really so good, right? That's going to get flagged. It's going to say insecure. Yep. So we need to convert those to HTTPS, which we've done for Imager. That was millions of images. That is done. We're working on the last vestiges of mixed content right now. Me and a guy named Samo out in Slovenia. He's my partner in crime here. So those kind of things, we can see with the client timings that some HTTP content is still being loaded, and we can go and find and kill those, which is it's kind of a neat little side benefit. But when we're moving from HTTP to HTTPS, or we're moving from our service to Cloudflare, or from we went from MaxCDN to Cloudflare to Fastly now is who we're on, and we can see this performance. You need to measure before and after, and before we did anything, we got this infrastructure set up. So 5% of requests, just take this little JSON blob you see at the bottom of that test page, send it up to our server, and we record it in a table so that we can get aggregate. And we have real-time monitoring all over the world about how long pages are taking to load, by country. And I will tell you, Cuba sucks. They're really, really slow. Like 3 seconds. It's horrible. Man. There's some strings and cups involved in Cuba internet. That in China doesn't do. My understanding is they don't do BGP. They do like static routing a lot, and then it just comes out the front door somewhere. I don't know, but the timings seem to reflect that this is accurate.
I like this. This is pretty cool. This teststackoverflow.com, because you guys are. I love the idea that you're doing a sampling, right? Because you have enough hits that you can just sort of randomly sample these at a really low percentage, and then you send all this data back, and this data's got to be instrumental. I mean, you could throw this. I'm guessing you have some like line charts where you're sort of tracking certain page performance over time, and
I've got an actual map up in here. So I need to uphold and mount this. We've got some 40-inch 4K displays. Yeah, and we just use Grafana internally. We feed all of this data not only into SQL, but also into Boson, which is an open source monitoring system we have. So it's metrics, telemetry, time series kind of stuff. And we can do this by country, by route, by everything. And we have real-time, colorization of the world for that stuff. And so one of the cool thing, the reason Test Stack Overflow exists is not for you to go see it. That's a side benefit. People are going to do it. So I put a nice explanation there as to what we're doing. But for example, right now, do you remember the DNS attack a couple months ago that took Twitter offline, dying, right?
Yeah, we talked about that.
So Twitter, their main thing was they had one name server. The next morning they had two, and now I think they've got a few more for their DNS. We were on Route 53 with Amazon. We are, as we speak, deploying Google Cloud DNS around the world right now to all of our domains. If you go to Super User, you'll see it enabled. It'll roll out to Stack Overflow probably this week. And we may go with 3 or 4 providers for DNS, so we have supreme redundancy. So we're testing. We can test the performance of Test Stack Overflow in an iframe that you don't see on StackOverflow.com to test other DNS providers without affecting page performance. So we can actually embed that and hide it as a trick to do client timings test for other scenarios, mainly for DNS lookups, CNAMEs, anything like that. So when we're moving from Cloudflare to Fastly, for example, how fast that resolution and TCP connection and HTTPS works, that's what we're doing. And additional certificates, protocols, see who's connecting on what, that kind of stuff's handy.
Okay, very cool. And then, how much do you focus on optimizing client versus server? Like, what is your approach there, or do you see it kind of all as the same thing?
It's all the same thing. We're always a lot of people are optimizing for a number, which is bad. If you're in the you're looking at a SQL query and you get the same results, but you can get them faster, obviously that's better, right? But a lot of times when you're zooming out to the world, what does the page load time matter? It doesn't. What you at your house perceive as the page load time is what actually matters, right? No one's got a thing in their browser that says how fast the page took to load, right? Except we do. It's actually in the corner of every single page. It's called Mini Profiler. So we're looking at that, but in terms of around the world, the client timings, that's one of the reasons we did this, is because that's all the way back to the user. What does it look like? What's your DOM load time? What's your render time? What's the resources? So if an ad is slow or an ad network is slow, we can be aware of this, right? That kind of stuff. So I think you're really optimizing for what the user perceives, and everything beneath that's just an element of it, right? Yeah. It's just some piece of the puzzle. Obviously, I spend a lot of time on the browsers or on the server side as fires happen and things. You push a change. We run at 5% CPU for the SQL server. You push a bad query, it can go to 90 in a hurry. That's why we run this. Yeah. So that's a lot of my time is fires like that kind of thing. I hop around and keep the gears moving. But the big picture is definitely client side, right? HTTPS doesn't matter so much to me. We're not a bank. There's not a whole lot of security data, but it's good. It's a good practice. What I want is HTTP2, which is way faster. Yeah. That HTTPS is a means to an end, to be honest, to get better performance. And if you go to Stack Overflow right now, as of yesterday, we flipped on HTTP2 for connecting up to Fastly, and all the static content is HTTP2, and it's measurably faster, up to 30-40% faster from where I'm at in the US. Yeah, and of course we're collecting data.
Yeah, everything I click on in Stack Overflow is like instantaneous. I mean, I have a good connection, but it just shows you guys have done a good job on the client and the server. Absolutely, even with these big pages.
And there's another blog post I did a while ago. Actually, I haven't blogged that much. I need to about optimizing at the browser, measuring at the browser. Yeah. If you look, I can send you links to it. That actually shows you some of the other things devs don't consider are like CWIND. And when you're coming in from a server, right? When you ask your server for a web page, you get 10 packets back before you say, yes, I've got them, and you get some more. So whatever's in those first 10 packets is incredibly important, because if it's enough to paint the page, wow, you're not down to so many milliseconds, you're down to one round trip. And your limit is basically the speed of light at that point, right? So some of that stuff's pretty important, but it's not really, like I was looking at the 10 fastest things website post a minute ago, and like they don't even mention this, which I find odd, because that's where the network between you and the user is huge, right? That's so critical, and people are more concerned about the browser or the server, but no, you can't ignore the in between. There's thousands of miles of fiber between you and that server. And
yeah, I love how I'm thinking about like what big dependencies can I get rid of, and you're like what is the speed of light? How close can we get to that?
And people misquote that all the time. They say the speed of light is this to this. Okay, that's in a vacuum, you jerk. It's like 1.5. None of the fibers in a vacuum unless you're on planet.
That's awesome. Love it.
So, I look at a lot of the blog posts you've done, and they're really cool. They're full of cable porn. They're talking about hardware specs, but a lot of the people talking about all of the cool things, all the cool people are going to the cloud. So what are your thoughts on that, since you at Stack Overflow do a lot of your hardware, host a lot of your stuff? What are your thoughts on cloud versus on-prem?
And how many times per day do you get asked that?
It happens often. Wait, actually, one of the blog posts those blog posts have a queue of things you can vote on. One of them is going to be on-prem versus cloud, right? We have people who used to run major websites on our SRE team, so we actually have experience from both sides, AWS and Google as well. The cloud's great for a large set of scenarios. Past a certain point of scale for a single thing, I think that really starts to break down. For example, on Azure, the biggest database you can get is a terabyte. Stack Overflow is 3. So immediately I just moved to the cloud. Okay, well, we've got to shard this, and all my foreign keys break down. And let's take it dumb. Let's say we didn't have to join anything, and we just needed ops per second. Well, if you convert DTUs, which, by the way, we looked at this and we're like, what the hell's a DTU? And then
yeah, I know. Yeah.
We're like, and the cost has changed a lot. These costs keep dropping in the cloud, right? But we were looking at DTUs, and we would need 8 SQL instances just to handle the ops per second, and that's assuming you didn't add joins and more queries to it. So you're talking about, just in terms of the Stack Overflow database alone, it was like $45,000 a month just to run the database. Forget all the other stuff. Well, we only pay about 40 with storage and memory and everything for a server one time.
Yeah, you guys are. I mean, you're definitely an edge case, and and it would be interesting. Well, like you said, you have some people on your team that have cloud experience, so it would be an interesting. And I'm sure, actually, I'm pretty sure you've gone through this, just doing a thought exercise around that. Like SQL database probably wouldn't be the answer there. It's the easy path. But it's probably not the right answer. I mean, you guys are probably better off going directly against something like blob storage, and then there's a whole bunch of extra work for you. So, there's sort of 2 aspects to this question. Because one is like, why didn't you just go cloud to begin with? Which I think is the one we're looking for the answer for. And then the other one is like, why don't you go cloud now? And I think that answer is like super obvious. Like, you guys would be working on that for the next 2 years and nothing would happen. That's my guess.
It would be stopped.
Yeah.
Right? And it's also we have a single database, a single master.
Yeah.
You would have to break that down. So, and there will be advantages to the cloud, right? I don't say the cloud sucks. When I tell people the cloud is a terrible choice for us, for our scenario, I'm very specific about that. And if you ever catch me not adding that caveat, just hit me in the head with a hammer, because that's important, right? For if you're running a small website, somebody asked me about a startup the other day. If you're doing ASP.NET hosting, what would you use? I was like, Azure. You don't need to buy a server. You don't need to spend your startup money doing this. You pay a very minimal amount, and you start up, you're going. And if you find that you need to move to on-prem later, fine, you can do that, right? What you can do in terms of why we weren't on it in 2008, it just wasn't there, right? I mean, you look back 8 years, and where was Azure?
Yeah,
right?
It's totally different.
Like Hyper-V, right? Hyper-V has gotten tremendously better because they've dog fooded the hell out of it, and the world's better for that. We're looking at moving to Hyper-V right now. We're testing it on a machine with local storage. We're on ESX right now, and we're tired of Flash, like the rest of the world. So, like, you waited about 5 years too long to get us off that one. So it just wasn't there, right? And the advantages I allude to, like performance in Australia. Well, if our app was running locally in a Sydney data center or in a Singapore data center, that would be better, right? A long-term goal we have is actually to put read-only nodes. I think what I can do is put Stack Overflow and all of our network in a box, about a 2U server. I think I can put the entire data center that we need to host the public websites in a 2U server and stick it in Singapore, and stick it in Europe, and stick it in South America. And then we can serve all read requests from that local point, which is 99% of our traffic is reads, right? The things of like, oh, you viewed a question, we need to record that data because the view count goes up, or you commented or things. We can route you back to New York for a couple of seconds and then come back local. But for 99% of requests, we could tremendously speed you up, right? Yep. So I think there's some in between a single location, which speed of light's a big enemy of us, and the cloud. But in way back when, it wasn't even feasible. I'm wondering how many references to Azure and AWS there were back then.
Yeah, and now, I mean, if you look at Azure today, I mean, we have double the data centers of AWS. There's 38 that are both planned or that are announced, and if you add the ones that are planned to be built, there's 38 regions. So you mentioned like Australia. I mean, like there's a data center there, right next to them, which is a huge advantage. Interesting. As an Azure guy, I'm just kind of thinking like, I think you would end up probably going against blob storage directly at the scale that you're at. You probably bring in a lot of other technologies for doing like indexing and things like that. I'm kind of curious as a thought exercise if blob storage, and I know you're probably not going to answer this, but I'm curious if that's cost effective, because I have seen other companies do it with like insanely higher amounts of data and still have it be completely cost effective. Obviously the discounting gets better as you're storing tons and tons of data. But with blob storage, I mean, you're paying kind of the bare minimum, and then you're doing that replication, which actually brings up another good point. I mean, you guys, how do you? I know you have multiple data centers, so like, how do you do that replication between there? Is that like SQL always on, or is it something else?
Yes. So AGs, always on availability groups,
Okay.
and SQL is the source of truth in our system. So Redis cache is populated at both sides. Elasticsearch, the clusters are independent in both data centers. They're just indexing locally. There's a tag engine locally. There's a one-to-one of everything in both data centers. For blob storage and things, I think what's an interesting use case for us that's really hard to measure and compare, that we haven't found good data to go against, is that 80% of our questions on Stack Overflow are visited every week. Mm-hmm. The tail is just humongous. People just find arcane knowledge all the time. A lot of people, like, you have a hot section of content and then a lot of cold storage, and we don't really, like, you're going to be accessing that stuff. So the amount, especially in the SQL, the database layer, a large amount of cache is important. Right now we're only at 384 gigs. That's not a lot of cache. No. You can get servers up to 6 terabytes now. We're going to go to 768 or maybe 1.5 in the new servers, but we're comfortable at 384 now. With something like a 99% hit ratio.
Yeah. God, I'd love to see Stack Overflow with like Azure Functions as the front end, like go completely serverless, and then use our storage technologies on the back end, and it'd be kind of neat to see like the opposite architecture and see what that looks like. But I love what you guys are doing though, because you're really pushing the envelope on the other end of the direction. So what I know you had mentioned things like Mini Profiler, and one thing that I've always found interesting about what you guys are doing is, you guys, I know you use some tools that already exist. Sometimes you reinvent, or I shouldn't say reinvent, that makes it sound bad. Sometimes you invent like newer, different tools that work really well for what you guys are doing, and other people find them useful. So, I think you guys have published quite a few like free tools out there for doing this stuff, right? I mean, Mini Profiler is one example. Are there others?
Yeah. There's a website that really needs a designer because it's designed by developer TM, right? Stackexchange.github.io.
Okay.
There's a landing page that lists all of the things, and for example, OpsServer is a .NET based monitoring system for SQL, Redis, everything else. It can pull from Orion, it can pull from Boson, and it can also look at all these things directly. That one I maintain. I rate 99.9% of that one. There's other stuff like Boson, which is our time series. It goes on top of time series. We're really hoping that InfluxDB comes along because OpenTSDB on HBase is the bane of our existence. We're afraid to add how many hours we've spent keeping that thing online. You send in 5 megabytes of data and it replicates gigabits per second across the network. Like, what the hell is that? And people are like, this is normal. Like,
so it's a little chatty.
It was like 20 to 1. No, sorry, 2,000 to 1. Amplification for replication. We're like, what? And it's
and then you get your own ORM as well, it looks like.
Do the block sisters. Dapper is very, very, very fast. Link to SQL was too slow for Stack Overflow, so we've replaced it. We're still on Link to SQL for some areas for writes. We're thinking about Entity Framework at some point. Things like Syntax and things, or Brett Copeland's team, they for the ad server, Calculon server, the ones that show you jobs on the side of Stack Overflow, they need to run various scheduled jobs and tasks. We'll actually have a scheduler that hits our network. We might get to that in February, and that'll be based on that piece of technology. Some other ones in there are...
I love that you have them all on one page. Like, I didn't know these pages existed, and it's great. Like, we'll have all these in the show notes so people can check them out.
I need to put it on Stack Overflow, or Stack Exchange. Sorry, the Stack Exchange website. Have you ever been to .com/performance?
No.
This is something we put together. So it's something I need to hook up to real time. What I plan to do is have this page pull from OpsServer as a plugin model. I'm waiting on some ASP.NET MVC bits there. But this gives you general stats about how we are, what the CPU load is, how many hits per second various systems get, requests per second to Redis and SQL and all, because some people find that interesting. Yeah, so one of the things I really want to do, so picture this is based on JSON coming in. So picture that JSON being available every 5 seconds or so from OpsServer refreshed in the background. Then I don't only have this as a website. I can actually use this in slides at presentations. So I can use cached JavaScript for our stats, but it can also do real-time updates because all my slides are HTML.
Yeah.
So we've got all these grand plans, and I need more hours in the day.
Yeah, you only work like 30 hours a day, right?
I've been trying to do 28.
Yeah.
A lot of it's open source. I mean, Stack Overflow doesn't. We don't work with people like that, but we We spend a lot of time in open source, especially at Mark Gravel and I, on Stack Exchange Redis is also another big one. So if you're using Azure Cache, that's one of the 2 libraries they're going to point you to use. And actually, as of this morning, 1.20 alpha is out, which adds geo functions and things like that. Mark did a big roundup of many PRs and things this morning. Okay. So what we do before one of the things that advantages of doing stuff at Stack Overflow is that we can dog food the hell out of it really quickly because we have the traffic to do it.
Yeah.
So before we put a package on NuGet, you can rest assured that it is tested at Stack Overflow. Before we
That's
mark
pretty
something,
cool.
yeah, before we mark something final, we will, like tomorrow morning, we will dog food this alpha and make sure it works 100% before we ever get close to marking it as release. It'll be running at Stack Overflow before it's labeled as open on NuGet.
That's
That's
cool.
just a really cool testament to of the code quality and what it can handle.
Yeah, it's only going wrong like a couple of dozen. No, it's usually pretty.
Your site is down right now. No, just kidding. Oh boy. Anything else that you wanted to mention? There are probably tons of questions we didn't ask that you have amazing answers to, but is there anything else that you think we should have asked?
I don't know. I want to see a lot of developers keep stuff simpler. I see people just going crazy, doing absolutely insane things to optimize. And if you just step back and say, what's the simplest way I could achieve this?
Yeah.
It scales better in many ways, right? Not just performance, but maintainability and extensibility, right? You can always make something more complicated if you need to, but a lot of people we try. I was tweeting this the other day of Dev Discuss was saying biggest mistakes you've made, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things we did at Stack Overflow was Teams, which was if you're following along, Teams was a horrible decision. We were like, we're building this, it's gonna be awesome. And we're like, who's it for? We're like, I don't know, we'll figure it out. And then people in Meta are like, who's this for? We're like, we don't know. And then eventually we went, what the hell are we doing? And we stopped it and did something else. But a lot of that stuff, Dapper, actually now you can select from a table, and if you store multiple types in a table that have the same abstract type. So if you have a column that's like JSON data and it populates other fields, now Dapper can type switch on whatever you want and populate many types of the same abstract type, right? So you could return a list of abstract, but each row be the thing it's supposed to be, right? You could have a table of animal, but you could have a dog, a giraffe, whatever per row as it comes out. And that kind of stuff we invented for Teams. Turns out a lot of people were asking for that in issues. We just didn't understand what they were asking for till we came to the problem. Mm-hmm. So I really, that's what I hope to see over the next 10 years, right? People just simplifying. Yeah. And a lot of the stuff's getting, and we're working with Microsoft on some of this too, right? We're working with the .NET teams. Some of the stuff's NDA, some of the stuff's not, but I'm hoping a lot of the stuff that we optimize here can make it back into the framework to where you don't need to come to my blog to find it. You don't need to do anything. It's there for you and it's automatic. All right.
So then the question I have for you then, are you looking at .NET Core?
Yes. So we're doing .NET Core on Stack Overflow. The honest answer I gave back in September was it's probably a year away. And the reason for that is there are plenty of libraries on not on .NET Core, and which I'm working on. I'm working on Mini Profiler v4 right now, which will support .NET Core. There's a weird delineation. A lot of people think .NET Core or not, and that's not actually how we think of it. It's actually new MVC or not. So if you're using ASP.NET MVC, HTTP context changed, HTTP request changed, all the types are different. So if you have so one of the other things that we do, for example, is log exceptions. All the exceptions for all of our apps go to one place, and we can view them in Ops Server, right? So all this stuff ties together. We use Stack Exchange Exceptional, which is something under my GitHub that it uses the HTTP request and context and things to grab things off and automatically record those. Well, obviously that doesn't work with the new MVC. So I need to rewrite that and release a different version, right? And due to the way the refs and things work, there's not a .NET Standard build and a .NET 4.6 build and a whatever. It's actually a different library. It has to be because you're referencing .NET Core with MVC over here, and this one references System Web. And they can't be the same thing. They have to be two different libs. So that's been a little bit of a sticking point where I'm figuring out exactly what that looks like with Mini Profiler right now. Once that's the case and we port the remaining libraries, then it becomes even a possibility to switch to Core. There are some that are really scary. Like we use .NET OpenAuth, which I might be abandonware at this point, but it's really stable, right? We have found no one implements OpenID correctly. right? So if you're thinking about using OpenID in your website, the best advice I can give you is drive far away from that decision. One of the biggest regrets we have as developers for OpenID. It's great. You can just log in with Google, and OAuth is another. OAuth, you have to have different code for Google, for Facebook, for whoever. So Microsoft has providers for this, which is great. But we're really afraid that a huge number of the edge cases of OpenID providers, because we support anyone's OpenID provider, over the years that we've accumulated and upstreamed to .NET OpenAuth, are going to be the same pain. We're going to repeat those when we move to any library. And that's kind of hard, right? You can't just say, oh, let's go back. Once you're moving to .NET Core, you kind of made that decision. It's a bigger change for a large code base than I think people are admitting.
Yeah, it is, for sure.
It's not bad. It's good stuff. The team's working crazy on perf. And we're on the slow version of ASP.NET. We can run on one web server.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we get performance off, right, when we move to core. It's good stuff. The main thing we want to do as developers, just as open source maintainers, we want to unblock you for .NET Core, right? Stack Exchange Redis supports .NET Core. Dapper supports it. Mini Profiler is going to support it. Exceptional is going to support it. Most of our libraries, and if you have something we make that you're ping us, right? And we'll try and get it moved over. And we're working on a lot of that you'll see us on GitHub, the issues. IDP connection. There's a saga there. If you're unaware, read it. It's fun. You'll laugh. Get a drink before you read that thread.
Okay.
And a happy ending.
Okay. Well, that's good. Okay. Very cool stuff. Okay. So let's move on to the Azure pick of the week. What do you got, Carl?
So for those of you who do things in the cloud, and you'll notice that especially in Azure, things work best if you can kind of keep them all in the same region. So if you can keep your database close to your stream analytics and message buses and all that stuff, everything just, it's cheaper. You can keep your data traveling in the same place. That's great, but not everything is available in all the different regions. So luckily, Azure has a website, azure.microsoft.com/region/services. And there you go. All of the different regions and all of the different services with a nice little chart on what's where. This came in really handy for me when needing to make a decision. We have clients that have customers in certain clusters throughout the world, and just trying to figure out which data centers made sense for where their customers were and what Azure features we needed to use. So I had been wondering if this existed for a while, but about 30 seconds in a Google search found it for me. So
there it is.
Now,
and it's got a cool
just
floating header as well as you scroll down.
I don't know if that's. Oh yeah, that's cool. So you can.
I'm easily.
So I'm in the Asia one. I'm in the Asia one right now. So you can see. Oh, that's Japan East versus Central India.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. All in one place. I like it.
Yep. I'm trying to keep my.
What was that?
Well, we had a bug report for that. The features you're talking about, someone was trying to use Redis because Azure Cache was in beta or test or preview, whatever. They kept trying to connect from Japan to Virginia and complained that sometimes the 500 millisecond timeout didn't work. We're like,
yeah?
Yeah.
Like,
the answer is yes.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Okay, Carl, what do you got for the app of the week?
So the app of the week is called Reigns, like reigning over someone, REIGNS. And this is a cool little game. First of all, it's really simple to play. You get a little card and you either swipe it left or right, and you're basically answering a yes or no question. And what decision you're making totally affects the game. And you're playing like a medieval king or queen. And what took me more, a couple of rounds to realize is you're gonna die, and you have like the dynasty of several hundred years to maintain certain goals, or your dynasty dies off. And it's kind of cool because the decisions that you made in the past kind of stick around to haunt you and your children and your great grandchildren. It's a really fun game, cool artwork, very simple to play. You can play it for just a minute or two if you want. So if you're on iOS or Android, definitely check that game out.
Yeah, I played it. It was pretty fun. It's cool. I mean, it has like cool sound, cool graphics, and yeah, it's kind of quick. And I don't know. I don't I mean, the point is just to live as long as you can, right?
Well, the thing is that there is a way to beat the game.
Okay.
So I've died a dynasty twice. So you get to like somewhere around present time ish.
Oh, wow.
And then you actually restart the game. You lose everything and start from scratch. Hard reset.
Oh, geez. Yeah. See, I've never.
So
made
there
it that
is
far.
so there is a goal, ultimate goal to get to. I just haven't figured it out.
Okay.
They just told you there was.
No, there is, and I've heard enough people like don't go searching on the internet, otherwise you'll see it. And I'm one of those. I don't like to ruin games. Yeah. So
okay,
that's exactly what I would say.
Yeah, and then what do you get for the dev tip of the week?
All right, I'm trying to stay away from keyboard shortcuts, but this one was just too cool.
So keep sending them to us.
People keep sending us keyboard shortcuts. So thank you again, Jason Nguyen. He sent us one for Visual Studio. So if you take you're familiar with collapsing and expanding code by the namespace, by the class, by the function. Mm-hmm. But let's just say you have you just want to hide some code and it's some legacy code. It's a few hundred lines or just 2 lines. You can actually select it and hit Control M, Control H, and it'll collapse it. And the cool thing about it too is it'll collapse in the middle of lines. So you could collapse the middle of a line if you wanted to.
Oh, that's cool.
If somebody wrote a 300 character line link statement or something and didn't.
I always thought it had to be at a code folding point, but that's pretty cool.
No, so you can do all this code folding wherever you feel like.
Okay. That is very cool. Let's see. Okay, so Nick, there's a game that we play on the show. What I need you to do, it's really complicated. I need you to pick a number between 1 and 4 and let me know what it is. And it's inclusive. So you are able to pick 1 and you're able to pick 4, but you don't have to.
4. Got to go base 2 here.
4. Okay. Would you rather be extremely lucky or be extremely smart, but not both lucky and smart?
Are you aware of which one I am? In this scenario?
I mean, like you pick one and then I'm like, ooh, you're really lucky.
You're a lucky jackass, or man, you're smart, but you get hit in all the wrong breaks.
So basically, you have to be lucky and dumb, or unlucky and smart.
I go with smart. Can figure my way out of things if I'm smart, right?
Yeah, but you can be really unlucky. This is really a no-win situation here.
We'll go with smart.
Okay, Carl, pick a number between 1 and 4.
I'll do number 3.
Number 3. Would you rather be forced to share your bedroom with a huge reindeer, or be forced to share your bathroom with a man who has strange skin rashes?
The reindeers aren't tameable. You can at least tell the guy with the skin rash.
I know, and it's in your bedroom. So you go to sleep and a reindeer attacks you viciously. No, thank you.
Or craps on your bed or something.
Well, yeah, I mean it's always there, right? And you have to feed it. So I'm going to bed. Better get some grain.
They vegetarians?
Reindeer? I think so. I don't think they're carnivores.
Okay, I'm just double checking. It's an important aspect to explore.
I'm just picturing the reindeer now putting a horse head in your bed. The note is you're next. Oh boy. Okay, so it looks like Carl, I think you have made a record here for the most links that we're going to put in our show notes.
I don't know if you noticed, but there's one that says to do finish.
Okay, so this is just a partial list. So our show notes will be exceptionally long, but I think that's some kind of world record, Nick. But anyway, where can people find you online?
Usually Twitter, Nick _Craver, because Jared Dixon had an underscore when I joined Twitter, and I didn't know any better.
And I will say it is definitely worth following you on Twitter. Some things are just hilarious, your take on things.
CES 2017, things that get Wi-Fi is kind of a gold mine. Just what the hell?
Okay, I'm now following you. It's a shame.
Oh, my pocket buzzed. That might have been you.
I was your buzz. Okay, and Carl, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Carl Schweitzer.
And you can find me at ytechie.com or on Twitter at twitter.com/ytechie. So Nick, thank you so much for coming on here, because this is, I've been fascinated by the blog posts that you've written in the past. So I really appreciate you coming on here and talking to us about this.
Thanks for having me.